All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we're going deep, deep into the world of illusions. We're talking about how those masters of mystery, magicians, use the quirks of our brains to make us see things that just aren't so.
And we've got some amazing sources to guide us on this journey, starting with Teller.
Yeah.
The Teller, from
Yeah.
the legendary duo Penn and Teller.
Amazing. And from the world of science, we've got Professor Susana Martinez-Conde, a neuroscientist who literally studies the science behind illusions.
Talk about a dream team. Now, when we think of magic, it's easy to imagine like supernatural powers and all that.
Yeah, like they're bending the laws of physics or something.
Right. But actually, what you're going to see is that magicians are masters of perception. They're kind of like hackers. But instead of computers, they're hacking our brains.
Okay, now that's a deep dive I can get behind.
Yeah.
So how do they do it? Where do we even begin to understand how our brains can be so easily tricked?
Well, both Teller and Professor Martinez-Conde point to one key fact. Our brains are wired for efficiency. They're constantly trying to predict what's going to happen next.
So it's like our brains are always saying, I think I've seen this before. I know how this works.
Exactly. Like imagine you're walking in the woods and you see something blurry and fast-moving. Your brain isn't going to sit there and be like, is that a friendly dog or a hungry wolf? Let me analyze the detail.
Oh, no, I'd be out of there.
Exactly. Your brain is going to be like, danger, run. And that split-second decision could save your life.
So it sounds like our brains are always looking for those shortcuts, those patterns that help us make quick judgments.
Exactly. And magicians, they're masters of understanding these shortcuts, these patterns. They've spent years studying how we react, how we perceive the world.
So are you saying they're kind of like, I don't know, scientists of the mind?
In a way, yeah. They observe, they experiment, they refine their techniques based on how people respond. It's fascinating.
So Taylor talks about this idea of understanding people better than they understand themselves. How does that play into his approach to magic?
Well, he calls it sensory laziness. It's basically our brain saying, I've seen this, I know how it works, and going on autopilot.
So it's like we get complacent, a little too comfy with what we think we know.
Exactly. And magicians use this to their advantage. They make these tiny changes that we don't even notice because our brains are on autopilot, assuming everything is as it was a second ago, and bam, that's when the magic happens.
So my brain is making stuff up. No way.
It is kind of wild, isn't it? But that's what makes it so fascinating. Our brains are constantly constructing our reality based on incomplete information.
So magicians are essentially hijacking that system, breaking our predictions, and making us question what we thought we knew.
That's the beauty of it. And Teller's very clear. He doesn't want to shut down our critical thinking. He actually wants us to engage, to try and figure it out. Even if we fail, that process of thinking, of questioning, that's what matters.
It's like a mental workout for our brains.
Exactly. It's a valuable skill, not just for appreciating magic, but for, navigating life in general. Always question, always be curious.
Professor Martinez-Conde, you bring in the neuroscience perspective, and you're saying illusions actually reveal the discrepancies between reality and what our brains are telling us is real. Even when we know we're being tricked, our brains can't help but see the illusion.
Yeah, that's the thing. Our brains are wired to process information in specific ways, and sometimes those processes lead to these perceptual hiccups.
Like glitches in the matrix. Can you give us an example of that?
Oh, absolutely. Those classic optical illusions, where you see a straight line is curved, or those images where you see one thing and then suddenly it shifts and you see something completely different.
Oh, yeah. Those are so trippy.
Our brain is trying its best to make sense of what it's seeing, but sometimes it gets a little confused, a little tricked. And that's what magicians are tapping into.
So you're also talking about things like change blindness, where we miss obvious changes in our environment, like that famous gorilla experiment?
Right. You're so focused on counting the basketball passes, you completely miss a person in a gorilla suit walking through the scene.
Yeah, that one blew my mind.
It shows how selective our attention can be. And magicians, they use these principles all the time, misdirecting our attention, making us focus on one thing while they're doing something sneaky somewhere else.
So sneaky. But I guess that's the point, right? To trick us into seeing what they want us to see?
You got it. Magicians are masters of manipulating our attention. And Professor Martinez-Conde has studied this in depth. It's fascinating stuff.
So it's not just about the tricks themselves. It's about the whole performance, the way magicians create this experience that literally captures our minds.
It is. And that's where the neuroscience gets really exciting.
Okay, I'm hooked. What's next? Let's break down some more of these mind-bending tricks.
Let's dive into some specific examples, like how they play with our assumptions about how the world works. Teller has some amazing insights into that, and Professor Martinez-Conde can explain the neural pathways involved.
I can't wait. Let's do it.
All right, let's get those brains working.
It's wild to think that magicians are basically like playing our brains like an instrument. They're hitting all the right notes, making us see or not see what they want us to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're playing on our expectations, how we think things work. Like Teller talked about this classic coin trick. He makes a coin appear, then another, then another. So your brain's thinking, okay, he's got a stash of coins somewhere.
You see a pattern, you think you know what's coming.
Exactly. You've made a prediction. And then he shows his hand. It's empty. But he keeps pulling out coins. It's like, hold on, what just happened?
Yeah, your brain's trying to scramble, make sense of
And
it.
it goes back to that sensory laziness thing.
Mhm.
Our brains lean on past experiences to figure out the present. So, it leaves us open to being tricked.
It's like they're pickpockets of the mind. One hand distracts you, and the other hand is doing the sneaky stuff.
Haha. I like that. Masters of misdirection using our blind spots. And speaking of blind spots, remember how we talked about that actual blind spot in our vision? It's wild.
Wait, so there's literally a part of my eye that can't see anything.
Yep. Where the optic nerve connects to your eye, there are no photoreceptor cells.
No way, but I don't, walk around with a black hole in my vision.
That's because your brain is amazing. It fills in the gaps using info from around the blind spot to make it seamless.
So my brain is making up part of what I see. That's kind of creepy.
It's pretty incredible. And guess what? Magicians can actually use this blind spot. They can make things vanish or appear in these impossible ways just by positioning them right.
Now I'm looking around like, what else is my brain hiding from me?
Don't worry. Your brain does a great job for the most part. But it's these little quirks, these loopholes that magicians use to create the illusion.
So no supernatural powers, just science.
Exactly. It's about understanding how we see the world, how our brains work. And Professor Martinez-Conde has done some awesome research on the exact neural pathways involved in these illusions.
So how do magicians tap into these pathways? Give us the inside scoop.
Okay, so there's this thing called redundancy reduction. Our brains are always filtering out unnecessary info, focusing on the key stuff like edges, corners. Magicians, they mess with this by subtly changing something we think we see, but our brain doesn't notice because it thinks the big picture is still the same.
They're messing with our expectations again, using our brain's need for simplicity against us.
Yep, they know we're looking for patterns, shortcuts. Teller also talked about how they use everyday objects, actions, to make it seem familiar, which makes the surprise even bigger.
Oh, right. He mentioned that palming technique, hiding something in your hand. It's such a normal action, we don't think twice.
And then, poof, it's gone. It's all about playing with those expectations, the automatic things our brains do.
Professor Martinez-Conde mentioned how magicians control where we're looking, right? They guide our eyes while they're being sneaky somewhere else.
Totally. They're masters of misdirection. They use movements, their words, even their eyes, to get our attention where they want it.
Like they're hypnotizing us.
In a way, yeah. They're tapping into those subconscious things that shape how I see, those automatic responses we don't even think about.
So even when we think we're in control, our brains are being played. That's kind of freaky, but also really cool.
I know, right? It shows you how powerful and complex our brains are. They're always learning, adapting, making predictions. And magicians have figured out how to, hack into that system.
Teller gets pretty fired up about unethical magic. It makes you wonder, with all this science of illusion, how do we tell the difference between real cognitive issues and just someone tricking us?
That's such a good point. We got to remember that magicians are entertainers. They're not trying to deceive or hurt anyone. They're just creating this sense of wonder,
Makes me think about that time I went to a psychic. Talk about a scam. It's crazy how easy it is for people to be fooled.
Exactly why critical thinking is so important. We got to be able to evaluate what people tell us, look for proof, be skeptical when something sounds too good to be true.
So knowing about the science of illusion, can that help us be more careful, more aware of those traps?
Absolutely. Understanding how we can be tricked makes us more aware of our own weaknesses, those biases we all have. We start to question things more, look for evidence, be careful of people who might be using our blind spots for their own gain.
So it's like knowing the magician's secrets makes us less likely to fall for their tricks?
Exactly. It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge, understanding the rules of the game so we can play it smarter.
Professor Martinez-Conde mentioned that the neuroscience of magic is still a young field. What's exciting you about the future of this research?
Oh, there's so much more to discover about how our brains create our experience of reality. Attention is a big one. How magicians can direct our focus so precisely in time and space. Understanding that could be huge for fields like education, therapy. Imagine being able to help people focus and learn better.
That's amazing. So, by studying magic tricks, we could actually help people with cognitive challenges.
Exactly. And memory is another exciting area. Magicians play with our memories, making us doubt what we saw or experienced.
Yeah, like those disappearing, reappearing acts. It makes you question your own memory.
Totally. Investigating how magicians do that could teach us so much about how memories are formed, stored, and retrieved. It could be revolutionary for conditions like dementia or PTSD.
So, the insights from magic could have real-world benefits for people struggling with these issues.
Absolutely. And beyond that, the study of magic gives us this broader view of consciousness, perception. It shows us that our experience isn't always a perfect reflection of reality, but more like an interpretation shaped by our brains and experiences.
It's like that saying, the map is not the territory.
Exactly. Magic helps us see that the map, our perception, is a useful tool, but it's not the whole story.
I love that. So we've covered so much today, from evolution to ethics. What's the most mind-blowing takeaway for you?
For me, it's realizing that these seemingly simple magic tricks actually reveal these deep truths about the human mind. They show us how our brains work, how we rely on assumptions, and how easily we can be deceived even by our own senses.
It's humbling, right? Knowing how easily we can be tricked.
It is,
Yeah.
but it's also fascinating. These illusions, they're not glitches, they're features that helped us survive, thrive in this complex world.
And understanding them helps us appreciate magicians like Teller and also potentially unlock ways to improve our cognitive abilities and help people with neurological problems.
It's all about curiosity,
Ah.
questioning what we think we know and being open to new possibilities.
It's really amazing how something like a magic trick can make you question everything you thought you knew.
It's true. It makes you realize just how powerful the mind is and how much we still don't understand about it.
And how easily we can be fooled.
Right,
You know?
absolutely.
Yeah,
But that's part of what makes it so fascinating, don't you think?
definitely. It's like magic is this perfect blend of art and science where creativity and understanding the human mind collide.
You said it. Magicians, they're like artists who use our brains as their canvas.
And Professor Martinez Conde brought up this super interesting point about how magicians can actually manipulate our perception of time. Do you remember that quote from magician Johnny Thompson? He said, "When the audience laughs, time stops."
Oh, yeah, that's a great one. And when you think about it, it makes sense.
It does, but how?
Well, think about what happens when you genuinely laugh. It's like this involuntary reaction that totally takes over.
Yeah.
Your attention is completely focused on that moment of amusement.
So it's like our brains hit the pause button on everything else.
Kind of. And for a skilled magician, that brief pause, that shift in perception, is a golden opportunity.
They can sneak in those moves, those manipulations that we'd normally catch.
Exactly. It's all about timing, knowing precisely when to create that distraction.
So it's not really that time stops. It's more like our brains are temporarily preoccupied.
Right. It's another example of how our brains prioritize. When something unexpected happens, especially something pleasurable, our brains have to dedicate extra resources to processing it.
It's like our brains are saying, hold on, this is new information. We need to figure this out.
And in that split second of recalibration, our normal perception of time gets a little wonky.
It's crazy. The more we delve into this, the more I realize how much we take our perception of the world for granted. We assume that what we see and experience is an accurate representation of reality, but after today, I'm not so sure anymore.
It's true. Our brains are constantly filtering, interpreting, filling in gaps based on what they expect to see.
It's like we're living in a virtual reality created by our own minds.
Uh-huh. In a way, yes. But it's usually a pretty good simulation, right?
Mhm.
It allows us to function, make decisions, navigate the world.
Well, at least until we come across a magician who knows exactly how to pull back the curtain.
Right. They expose the cracks in the matrix, so to speak, by understanding and exploiting the limitations of our perception.
So they're not just entertainers, they're like mind explorers in a way.
That's a great way to put it. And in doing so, they challenge us to think differently, to question what we think we know.
Okay, so we've covered so much ground today, from the psychology of deception to the neural pathways of illusion. What's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
That's a tough one. But I think the most important thing to remember is that our brains are incredible but fallible. We're constantly making assumptions, predictions, filling in gaps based on our past experiences.
And those shortcuts, while usually helpful, can make us vulnerable to being tricked.
Right, but by understanding those vulnerabilities, we can actually become more discerning, more critical thinkers.
So it's not about being suspicious of everything, but more about approaching the world with a healthy dose of curiosity and a willingness to question what we see and hear.
Exactly. Ask questions, look for evidence, and don't be afraid to challenge your own assumptions.
And, hey, if you ever get the chance to see a magic show, go for it. It's not just entertainment, it's a chance to witness the amazing power of the human mind.
Absolutely. You'll never look at the world the same way again.
And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the science of illusion. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, the real magic is happening right between your ears.
Well said.